set to go? Not with the video, but you're ready for an answer. All right. Okay, everyone, we're going to continue with our press conferences. Today we have a special press conference, and we have a very special guest. Lyn St. James is with us, and great celebration this weekend. 30 years ago, on approximately the same date, Lyn came here driving a '89 Ford Thunderbird Super Coupe that was prepared by none other than the Bill Elliott race team. And Lyn proceeded to set 21 FIA national international speed records here on the 2.66 mile speedway, including 16 that could have been held by either men or women. But in addition to that, the biggest record, without doubt, was the fastest one-lap average, 212.577. That set the women's national closed course speed record. And she also had a top speed that day, and get this, 232.4 miles per hour. We have a little video we're going to show that kind of illustrates what we're talking about, and then we're going to hear from Lyn. So let's look at this video.
Speedway. It is here that racers come when they want to set new standards in high speed. In 1985, racing driver Lyn St. James came to Talladega, and when she left, she had set 13 new national and international speed records.
She has won the 24-hour race at Daytona twice and the 12-hour race at Sebring. She's competed at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. She earned her way to the Brickyard. She not only succeeded, but excelled. Lyn finished 11th in her first 500.
Lyn St. James has received the 1992 Bank One Rookie of the Year Award.
Lyn St. James' attempt in a 1989 Ford to break some real important records at Talladega this Monday and Tuesday. The car has an engine built by Ernie Elliott. The car was prepared in part by Bill Elliott. It's a 1989 Ford Thunderbird.
And Lyn left Talladega with 21 national and international speed records to her credit.
The individual one lap was this morning, which is a new record, which was 212.577. Congratulations.
Yeah, pretty cool to look back. Also, in addition to the speed record efforts, Lyn is obviously remembered for her success in sports car racing and of course IndyCar. Lyn, that day, setting all those records, what are some of your memories of that day here?
Well, I thank you very much, by the way. Thanks, Herb. Thanks for the Speedway for bringing the car back and bringing me back. And I had not been back since 1988, so I had a flood of memories, seriously, as I came in. This track is enormous, and I had forgotten that. And, of course, it looks better now with people and cars. When we came here in October 10th of 1988, there's like nobody here. And there's nothing worse than being at a racetrack when there's nobody here and it's this immense, and you realize we had all these media and all the people that were here, and they only had one car to watch, and that was my car. It was just the weirdest feeling. I kept looking around thinking, God, I wish they would just have somebody, I wish some other car had just been going around or something, and so it was a very tedious day. I thought I would love driving this Thunderbird. And obviously I'd gotten to know Bill and felt I had a lot of years under my belt of racing Ford sedans, mostly Mustangs and the Ford Probe and some other production-based cars, and they're heavy, and particularly maybe not as heavy as a stock car, but they still were big and heavy, and I figured I would really adapt to this really well. And I really didn't adapt to this very well because the car just seemed so immense and so heavy and somewhat numb compared to what I was used to. And so Bill kept, sticking his head in. I'd go out and do some runs, and then he'd stick his head in the car here in pit lane, and, how's it going? And I'd look up to him, and I said, I don't know who's driving this, because it isn't me. I said, I turn the wheel, and nothing happens, and then I watch the RPMs drop, and it was just driving me crazy. But eventually I got more comfortable with it, obviously, and we were able to then set all these records, which some of them were standing starts. I mean, it was, as I said, it was a very tedious day. And of course, it was very much like the weather of today, where it started out nice and cool, and then the heat built up throughout the course of the day, and it just got hot. The track got hot. So we'd set some records. We thought we were done, but we kind of knew that there was more to be had. So we still had a celebration at the end of the day, and thank God some of the media actually stayed overnight and came back out the next morning, and we went back out and went a little faster with a nice cool temperature. So it was just, you know, I'd been here in 85 when I set the records with the probe, so I kind of got a sense of what it would be like. But that feeling of isolation, we just, you know, very rarely you're ever at a racetrack where you're the only race car. Even if you're testing, it's never just totally private testing. So it was a great day. It was a great effort. I really thanked Ford Motor Company and Goodyear. Goodyear was not always happy when I called them about trying to get tires to go and set speed records, because they say if it goes well, we never get the credit, and if it goes bad, they always blame the tires. But Goodyear was really good about providing the tires, and Ford, of course, wanted to debut the '89 bodywork of the Super Coupe. So this gave them an opportunity to bring out, sort of with a little bit of hype, their '89 body style, and it gave the Elliots, and I think I can say this now, I couldn't say it then, that if you're a factory team, supported team, you're not supposed to give anything to one team that you can't give to all the teams. And so everybody knew the '89 body style was coming out, but this project started in March of '88, really didn't come to reality as far as a build list until May. Don Hayward, who's still around, was the engineer at Ford. And so the Elliots got an opportunity, because this was not a NASCAR spec car. This was a purpose-built speed record car. They got to go to the wind tunnel with the '89 body style, which gave them a little more knowledge about what they were going to be racing in 1989 without breaking the rules. Probably. I don't think they broke the rules anyway. So it kind of, there were other little agendas that sort of were of benefit. And I always like that, when you could put something together that benefits you but also benefits others. So that's kind of how that all came together.
All right.
Any questions?
Well, we're going to take some questions now. Questions for Lyn, raise your hand. We'll come around for wireless. Right here, please.
I'm Matt Weaver with Auto Week. Lyn, I'm curious what your thoughts are on the creation of this W Series, the all-female driver league that's coming out in Europe.
It's the first question. I love it.
Hard-hitting right off the bat.
Yeah, that's all right. We're talking about now, which is good, because this was, 30 years ago. I'm still mulling that over a little bit, obviously. I mean, first of all, off the top, any opportunities that present themselves that give a chance to put women in race cars, I'm like, you got to at least take a hard look at it, because I'm for any opportunities that can put women in race cars. Do we need a women-only series? No. I mean, I really don't think there's a need for that. But before I can have a really hardcore response, like make a statement that puts me right on record, I want to know where the funding source for this is. When you read what they're proposing, no cost to the drivers, $1.5 million points fund with a $500,000 prize to the winner. I want to know where the funding source is, and I want to know what is that mission of that funding source. I read press releases, I've read everything I've read, but I still want to know that, because that's, how real is that? I mean, that's a lot of money. And if that money could be spread in different ways, could have a good result, have a better result potentially maybe. And so I have a bigger question than I do an answer, other than a short answer is, if it provides opportunity for women drivers, you got to take a hard look at it. You can't throw it under the bus. Do we need an all-women series? I don't think so, not at all. I can't support that that's necessary. And so the other is just more question than it is an answer. I mean, I think, hey, if you want to start a new series, put half women and half men. That would give, some guys a chance that maybe wouldn't have had an opportunity as well. So, anyway.
And a second question. You've played a mentor role to a lot of women in motorsports over the last several decades. Is there anyone that you're working with right now that really stands out that you think has a great future in racing?
Well, for sure, Courtney Crone is one that I've worked with the last 3 years. She's been a recipient of our Project Podium Scholarship, and I've gotten to know her. I've gone to some of her races. So right now, she certainly comes to the top of the list. And actually, anyone that I have personally am familiar with, because I've been to her races, and I really I can support drivers that I get an opportunity to read their resume, talk to them on the phone, hopefully beat them. but until I've actually seen them race, it's really hard to sort of really get to that level of an endorsement. And she's the only one in the last few years that I've actually been able to see race that's still racing and that I see has huge potential. But I know there's others out there. I mean, I get their resumes all the time. So, but she is right now the one that comes to mind. Yeah.
Okay, we have a couple over here. Go ahead, please.
Lee Spencer, RacingVoice.com. Do you think if you had started your career earlier that there could have been the potential? I'm over here.
Oh, thank you. I'm
Sorry.
Like, where are you?
Do you think there could have been the potential to do something more in stock cars, other than just testing, or because you're from the Midwest, at that time most Midwesterners gravitated to open wheel?
Well, I didn't really start racing until I moved to Florida. So, when I lived in the Midwest, I only saw drag races and some fairground racing, and then I did go to the Indy 500 as a spectator, but that was way out of my league. But it wasn't until I moved to Florida that I even got involved in racing. Had I started earlier, based on my age being what it is, I don't know what I ever would have been able to accomplish or figure out. I can't imagine being 18, 19, 20 years old and having to process the kind of stuff we have to process to make decisions. I mean, I didn't start racing until I was 27, so reality was I was an adult, somewhat mature, started a business. I had a bit of a business brain, and I really had a business background, which gave me an edge. But I could tell you one thing, based on that ability of driving a really good stock car in 1988, I didn't really like it that much, and so I would love to drive stock cars now because I know they've got some technology and they actually work really well. But if I could be reborn now, that might be a cool thing. But I wouldn't have wanted to started younger. I don't think I would have gotten into stock cars back then because my style is I love high speed, I love smooth high speed driving. Where you really thread the needle, and that's why I did so well at Indy, I think, was because that's the way you have to drive at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's got 4 high-speed corners, and I mean, I do well on road courses like Daytona and Watkins Glen that have a good rhythm, and I know what I've learned and developed, and I think that probably wouldn't change based on age. It's just based on your innate, your aptitude and your, where your hot buttons are.
All right. Back here, and then we're going to go over here. Go ahead.
Rick Minner, when you look at the picture here of you in the car from your record-setting day, and the cars out here in the garage and the safety equipment they have, do you maybe sometimes wonder what was I thinking about going 200 miles an hour in that car?
I'm glad I didn't think about it. Thinking is, you're just doing when you're in a race car. And we didn't have speedometers. We didn't even have digital readouts like they do now. But your desire and your passion outweighs logic and rational thinking. So, but I get in that seat though, and at least, that seat is a really good seat, and that roll cage is a really good roll cage. So from a safety standpoint, I'm not necessarily saying I want to hit a wall with that, but I think it's, for the time it was a safe car. So I've always, whenever I've gotten into any race car, and I'm still racing today. I just raced a 1954 Lancia D24 last weekend at Sonoma, and it only had a lap belt. I put my Hans device on, and they go, "Why are you wearing that?" Because without the shoulder straps, it's not going to do its job. I said, "I just feel safer," And then a couple of months ago, I raced a 1925 Bugatti Type 35C, and it only had lap belts. So safety is it's a relative thing, but it's something that I am always looking at what safety is in place before I want to get in a race car. And some of the older ones, obviously, I still raced it as hard as I could, but not to put anything at risk. So safety is important, and I'm glad to see the safety measures that are being made today, the tracks and the cars and everything. I'm not discarding that, but as a race car driver, we just tend to not look at that as carefully as we probably should.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more. We're right here, and then we'll go to Mark.
Jerry Jordan, kicking the tires, setting that in PRN. I want to piggyback a little bit off of Matt's question a while ago about you following and staying up with the young girls, the young women who are coming into the sport. NASCAR has a diversity program, and one of those up-and-comers right now is Haley Deegan. But what do you see as the future of women in stock car racing in NASCAR, and what advice would you give to someone like Haley, who just got her first big win a few weeks ago?
Well, I think I've known for a long time now, and I started my driver development program in 1994, and almost not so much in the early 90s, but later 90s and into the 2000s, almost every female driver that came to our driver development program or applied, they all wanted to be stock car drivers. I mean, it was really the trend or the what they were looking at, and so I'm surprised more haven't made it through the ranks. I personally think that there's a couple of things that there's a couple of disconnects that are happening. I mean, I've been part of NASCAR's Diversity Council now for decades, and they always don't like to hear what I have to say, but I've been very vocal about things. And I know they really want to make it work, but certain things get in the way. And it isn't just funding, which is what everybody wants to blame. But I think that they're looking too young, for one thing. I think it's even across the board. I mean, if you haven't figured out, if somebody doesn't have their eyeballs on you by the time you're 22, maybe 23, the window's closed, and I think that's wrong. I think we got to quit looking that young, because that's even on the tie end of the window. They're looking 16, 17. The other is that the top teams, and this isn't just NASCAR, even though I think it really plays out more in NASCAR, is the top teams are not connected enough to the ladder system, to the downward, and so to get with a top team in K&N or even Truck or Xfinity, it's really, there's only one or two teams that are probably, mostly that are capable of winning, and there's a lot more drivers trying to get into those seats. And so if we had better across the board and the teams at the top, let's say at the cup level, were more invested in some way, shape, or form through that ladder, that you would then be able to attract somebody when they're 16 or 17 and then actually bringing them up through the culture, because every team has a different culture, and you'd be able to bring them all the way up and weed them out in the process as well. So I think, the Haley thing is fabulous, but it's like, if it doesn't lead to something for her, then she's going to struggle just like almost anybody else that wins the K&N race, or maybe even wins a championship, is then they fall off the radar because they just didn't make that next step. And then it's very hard to then fill the pipeline. So there's something wrong with the way the whole pipeline doesn't work. I mean, at least there's the road to Indy in the IndyCar series. It doesn't mean that it leads to it, but at least they're paying attention. They have some investment in the series below the IndyCar series. So, and I mean, to be honest, if you look at NHRA with their junior dragster program, that truly shows this connection from the youth all the way up through the system, and that's why, for many other reasons as well, but that's one of the reasons why there are so many more women successful in NHRA, is because, they have like 40 or 50% of their junior dragsters are girls. So at least it feeds up, We don't have a feed up system.
Okay, our last question right here.
Lyn, in '94, when you began your development program, what were your expectations for the top series, for opportunities for women, not just for NASCAR, but for IndyCar, and versus what it is now?
Wow. I pride myself for not being too terribly naive, but I was pretty naive, I think, on this one. I really, my goal in setting that was that we would be able to bring 24 drivers a year, which is what I tapped it out at, because that's as many names as I can remember over 4 days. But we could bring 24 drivers in that had already 3 or more years of racing experience, and we'd find the cream. We'd find, looking for the cream. You get 24 of those cream, and you give them all this information and all these contacts, that there would be this, they would just filter right out into the sport, and we would see them progress at a accelerated level compared to not having the knowledge that we gave them and the resources that we gave them. And that didn't happen. I mean, after 10 plus years, I started to really get worried about it. I mean, I'm like, something's not working here, And because, I mean, Danica came through our program, Sarah Fisher came through our program, Melanie Troxell came through our program. There were some, that, because it wasn't just NASCAR. It was, I didn't really care what type of racing. USAC, there was a lot of sprint car and USAC type drivers that came in that were doing quarter midgets and midgets and sprint cars. So, but it just didn't seem to make a difference. It just drove me crazy. And then I realized I wasn't always getting the cream. I was actually getting a lot of milk. And I don't mean to throw anybody under the bus, but to be successful in this sport, besides having resources and knowledge and a leg up, you really have to be better than good. There's a lot of good race car drivers out there. You have to be better than good to be able to even be considered at that next step. And I was getting a lot of good race car drivers, and I wasn't getting many exceptional ones. And then, why wasn't I? Well, a lot of times it was the wrong timing. You know, they were busy that weekend. Well, I can't do this every weekend. It wasn't a business. It was, so it was a learning process for me. And the final reason that I got totally discouraged and then just created the scholarship program was because I ended up spending most of my time fighting with parents. And that's not at all what the program was supposed to be. I mean, I had parents just, you know, arguing with me, and I'm like, you know, this is, go home. If you know all the answers, you know, go home. And I realized how the parental involvement, because we want so young, when you're still living at home, you have to eat what your parents feed you in most cases. And if the parents aren't willing to change, then, you know, your hands are tied. So there was a lot of, I was much more naive about, I think, this process than I realized. And so I'm proud of the program, but I was disappointed, and that's why I now have a scholarship program, and it's a lot more paperwork and calling references and then looking for the cream. And, you know, literally in the 10 years since I started the scholarship, we've only given scholarship to funding to about 12 drivers, I think, you know, and of those 12, 5 or 6 of them, Shea Holbrook, Julia Landauer, you know, there's a number of them that are at least out there racing, and where I know we made a difference with them, you know, where they took the material, the information besides the money, and they executed. They actually did stuff with it. So thanks for asking. Sorry it's such a long answer, but it really is.
Okay, we have the record-setting Thunderbird out here for a photo op.
And it would have started, but the battery's dead. So, but it'll run. I took it up the hill. I took it up the hill at Goodwood in 2007, and it was sweet. I mean, I actually was surprised it turned right, because it wasn't really built that way. But we made some tweaks so that it would, because there's some right-handers as you go up the hill at Goodwood, and it was part of their celebration of record-setting vehicles, and so I know it runs. It was the first time it had run. That was in 2007. It was the first time it had run since 1988. So we had to go through it, obviously, and make sure. But it's a runner. So.
Well, good. We're going to go out right outside here if you'd like to join us for this photo op. But in just a few minutes, we'll be back in here continuing with the press conference schedule. Lynn, outstanding.
Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you.